Pine Soil and Water Conservation District.
Also, Maureen Hoffman, planner with Washington County Public Health and Environment Department.
I'm Sharon LeMay, Anoka Conservation District.
Anyone else? Very good. Thank you. And thank you all for joining us. We'll try to be efficient with our time today. We do, Angie did pop the agenda up a little bit ago. Are there any additions to the agenda? Otherwise, a motion to approve the agenda would be in order.
I have a couple of things.
Go ahead, Jackie.
Okay. The first one is the emergency action project protocol and procedure. We had talked about that in August. And I thought we were expecting it at the next meeting, which would be this one. I didn't see it, but if we can just put a point on the agenda so we can address it.
Yes.
When we might expect it. And then the other one was on the discussion of the workflow and project approval process. There's no mention of policy committee involvement in any of those. So if we could just make a note to allow that discussion.
Okay. Yes, and I do recall the conversation about the emergency project approval, and we were going to address that during that discussion of like the workflow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Move to approve with the additions. Susan, Iceni County.
Jackie
Thank you.
Anderson, I'll second.
We got a motion and a second. Any discussion? I think at the last meeting, we thought we could manage doing rather than roll call votes and spending a lot of time. What I'll do is just ask, are there any objections to that motion?
Sounds good.
Hearing none, the motion carries. And then we'll move to the minutes of our July 26th additions or corrections. I noticed one on, let's see, where was it here? Right at the beginning, in item 2, Jim Burke holds votes to approve as published. Doug Odegaard second. It really should be moved to approve. And then the motion, it should be recorded that the motion carried.
Got it.
Any other changes to the minutes?
I just had a clarification. This is Jackie Anderson again. On
Go ahead.
page two, under the financial update, number 3 from Craig Mell, he was explaining the negative number question from Mr. Mergens. And it stated that a negative number means that the match has been met and exceeded for the watershed education portion of this grant. I'm not understanding what that means. I don't think that's the full answer that he gave. I mean, maybe it was, but I didn't pick up on that. There's really no way to exceed that match. So is the money coming from the partnership of the East Metro Water Education Program partners? Or is it coming from the Lower St. Croix budget? It's just not clear to me what that means. So if that could be further investigated and looked into.
Sure, I can have Craig speak to that, but in answer to the question, is the match coming from MREP? Yes. We have been using hours that we are doing, that the MREP partners are paying for, that are directly related to grant objectives as match. And we set out ahead of time and said, well, you know, we need to do at least this number of hours of match, and where that's been exceeded, that's where that wording's coming in, saying the match has been met and exceeded, because we've actually done, you know, far more education than what would be required for a match.
Okay, well, that just begs another question then. And that is, we need to talk about the partnership of Lower St. Croix and how they're going to contribute to that MREP foundation, because it expands beyond the MREP contribution members. But that's for another topic, for another meeting, maybe the next one. But if we can just clarify that in the minutes.
Do you have, I'm not finding where you're at, Jackie. I'm looking at the minutes here and my pages aren't numbered, so.
No, I know. I just went, I number them myself. And so,
It's
okay.
on the second page underneath financial update. So it's
Yes.
item number 3. Where,
3D.
let's see, I can scroll the view everybody else is looking at so that there we go. So it's this section right here.
Okay. And so how would you like that changed, Jackie? So I understand how you want the minutes corrected.
Just to clarify that the money is coming from the MRAP program and
Okay.
not from the Lower St. Croix budget.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, we can do that. Any other additions or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes as corrected?
Chris DeBose will make a motion as amended.
Steve Holland will second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Any objections to that motion? Hearing none, motion carries. We'll move into our financial progress update. Craig and Emily, please.
Emily, do you want to go first with the first document here?
Yes, I can do that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Angie. So on the screen, you'll see a document that was in your packet. So the financial update, just a high-level summary of that 1.2 million watershed-based implementation funding grant. Of that, 47% of grant funds have been encumbered. So the project's been approved, but just hasn't been billed yet. And that includes just encumbered. And then actually spent, so invoiced and paid is only 3%. And then that match budget, which we were talking about earlier, that minimum required match is 10%. So you see that 129,000. So far, the total match spent is 12%. And we've got budgets for that for certain line items, and we can exceed, if we spend more match than what is budgeted, then that's just going above and beyond. We need to spend at least 10% of the grant funds in match funds, so coming from individual partners. Craig, did you want to add anything on the financial update?
I can do that when we get to my spreadsheet following up.
Oh, sure. Okay.
Thank you.
So the following 3 illustrations are just to give an idea of progress toward those phosphorus reduction goals that are in tables 5.2 and 5.3, I believe, in that comprehensive watershed management plan. So this first one, so those are all kind of derived from our TMDLs and RAPs in the plan. And so from that, we derived some 2-year goals. Just here's what we think we can achieve with the grant funds given to us in this 2-year period. So that total reduction of 915 pounds is what we propose to achieve with the grant funds. Of that, with those 2 projects that have been approved, that McQuaid Ravine Stabilization by South Washington and the Pine County cattle exclusion, between those 2, that achieves 24% of that proposed phosphorus reduction for the grant. Then if you go down, kind of just extrapolating a little bit more, if you look at our 10-year comprehensive plan, so those tables 5.2 and 5.3, the cumulative reduction for all of our target streams and target lakes is 5,500 pounds of phosphorus that need to be reduced in order to meet those state standards. So if you just look at those 2 projects that we've approved so far, that's only about 4% of the way. So that kind of gives you a sense of how far we have come and how far we need to go to achieve those goals in that 10-year plan. And then that last one is hopefully not too disheartening, but that is the total reduction goal for the entire basin, again, cumulative of all the target streams and target lakes. To get them to state standards, we needed a cumulative phosphorus reduction of 64,000 pounds, and that's on an annual basis. So it's just a kind of a drop in the bucket so far, and it would really, if we did 5,500 pounds every 10 years, what is outlined in that plan that's been approved by Bowser last year, it would take about 100 years to achieve that goal. So just to kind of put things in perspective where we are. And of course, you know, that looks very small, but projects being implemented by partners that are just outside the scope of this grant, those will help achieve those goals too. And if, you know, connectivity of water bodies, say you achieve reductions for a lake, and that kind of in turn helps achieve reductions downstream. So there can be a cumulative effect there. And so these are really just looking at those phosphorus goals. We all know, of course, there's other benefits as well, other nutrients that are being reduced, whether that's nitrogen in some cases or total suspended solids, and then creation of habitat and things like that. There's definitely other benefits that aren't quantified in these graphs, but that we're aware of. And with that, can answer any questions or otherwise let Craig move on to the financial update.
Go ahead, Craig.
Thanks, Angie, for pulling that up.
Yep.
This is just a spreadsheet that we keep as a planning team. So far, 5 of the 10 activities have funds encumbered towards them, including activities 1, 2, 3, 8, and 10. I do anticipate funding will be coming soon, funding requests for activities 7 and additional 8. And you can see to date, we've encumbered 47% of the funds that we have allocated to this grant. And as Emily mentioned, we've had 18% spent. Just going back, Jackie, to your question, the group's question, whenever we have a negative on that match, that's a good thing. That means we've exceeded the amount we were proposed to match. As you can see in column C, we have 3 items that have the match coming for this grant, with most of it coming from these structural ag and structural urban BMPs. Unless there's any questions, I'm more than happy to ask those now. Otherwise, that's everything I have.
Any questions for Craig?
So Craig, just to clarify, so what you're saying is that these other 2 that you're recommending to combine, I guess, or have a flexibility to combine, that's where those excess funds came from?
I'm sorry, Jackie, I couldn't hear that question real clearly. I apologize.
Okay, what you're saying here is that by combining all 3 of those ag areas, you're getting a surplus from the other areas? Is that what I heard?
I guess I'm not understanding that question. I apologize.
Well,
Are you talking on the match, Jackie?
Pardon me?
Are you talking match?
Yes, you were explaining that how the match can be in a negative position.
Yeah, so for our
Exceed the
match right now, if you look at match under activity 2 and activity 3, we've exceeded the amount of match for both of those line items that we said in our work plan that we were going to have. So for example, activity 3, we had $4,800 that we had anticipated having in match. And to date, we have $14,711, which gives us a surplus of $9,911 of match. Same with activity 2, we anticipate having $55,000 of match, non-WBIF funds. And to date, we have encumbered $75,900 of match, or in excess of $20,900 in match.
Well, that doesn't mean the grant dollars are going down, correct?
Correct. No, that's a good thing. It means we're bringing in more funds to get projects done.
Right. But shouldn't that be represented as excess funds for other projects, not excess to the grant that you're talking about? That's all I'm talking about, is that, you know, when you start combining these things, it gets confusing if you don't have a better explanation of how you're using that fund.
We have not decreased the amount of WBI funds in any line item at this point. We just have extra grant funds that have been made available, or excuse me, extra match funds that are not WBI funds have been made available to the partners.
Craig, I wonder if you could just make a footnote or something at the bottom of that table indicating what you just said.
Sure.
And that might help, somebody else looking at this chart and looking at those numbers.
We can do that.
Fabulous.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Craig? Thank you both, Craig and Emily. We'll move into subcommittee updates. Agronomy, Jay.
Excuse me, Commissioner Myron, we do have a question. We have a memo that's the next part of this discussion.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead then.
Angie, can you scroll forward to that memo, please?
Yep, I sure can.
So
Okay,
this memo was included in your policy committee packet. This memo was developed by the planning team, was brought forth through the steering committee at their September steering committee meeting, and is now coming forward to the policy committee. One thing that we would like to to do is we'd like to combine activities 2 and 5. Currently, activity 2 is structural ag BMPs, and activity 5 is structural urban BMPs. We have, at this point, we've over encumbered what our work plan said. We've encumbered a little extra into the ag BMPs on those 2 big projects. And it would give flexibility. We've combined those 2 subcommittees into one. So we have an activity 4, 5, I'm sorry, activity 2, 4, 5, 9 subcommittee that meets jointly. And what we'd like to do is have the flexibility to utilize those $360,000 of funds. It's $160,000 for ag, 200 for urban as one pot of money, making it easy for us to get projects done. Ultimately, this is going to result in more ag BMPs putting out in the landscape. And then the second part to that discussion that the planning team is requesting is to continue to follow the Bowser Grants Administration Manual for this grant. If there's any questions on the Bowser Grants Administration Manual, you can see those both in the memo that we have listed here, or Melissa King is on the meeting with us, and allow us as a planning team to make recommendations to the Chisago SWCD on how to move those funds around, which is within our flexibility of up to $50,000. And if there's any other planning teams that would like to add discussion on that, I'd be more than welcome.
Questions on the recommendation?
I have a small question.
Go ahead.
I made some notes on this packet today, but under the chart, the third row down, who's BC? What or who is that?
Board Conservationist Melissa King at this current point.
Okay, so that's the Bowser person?
Correct.
Okay, and then 2, 4, 5, and 9. I don't have a problem with that, but the memo in front of us is for A2 and A5 combination. So,
Correct, yeah. We are not looking to combine 2, 4, 5, and 9. I'm just saying the 2, 4, 5, and 9 subcommittee meet as a whole. And so then
okay.
they would have the flexibility to discuss activities 2 and activity 5, which are the urban and ag structural BMPs.
Okay. I will make a motion to move the motion as presented. Combining A2 and A5. Mhm.
I would second.
We've got a motion and a second discussion. Any discussion at all? Any objection to that motion? Hearing none, then the motion carries.
Thank you, everybody.
I'm sorry I missed that one. We'll move into subcommittee updates.
there
Agronomy,
is
Jay.
actually, sorry,
Is there
Commissioner
another?
Muran, to keep interrupting you. There is actually one more thing on the agenda before the subcommittee updates. The project request packet. Here is the
Okay.
next thing. And I
Okay,
think-
I'm sorry.
No problem. Emily, did you want me to scroll through that and you want to talk about it?
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, thanks again for displaying. So yeah, during this, I think I can give a brief update on what the planning team and steering committee have been working on as far as a process for approving projects for grant fund usage. And in that, we'll talk about the emergency projects question that Jackie had earlier. So the planning team and with approval from the steering committee worked together to basically take this WBIF work plan that the policy committee approved, and I'll give it a little bit more structure as to here is the process, here are the steps that partners need to take. If you have a project in mind or a study or anything like that, that you think fits into that work plan, and so you can use those grant funds to implement that. We came up with this project request packet, the first element of which is this cover memo that any one of our partners as part of the JPA will need to fill out and be the project sponsor. If you just scroll through, there's various information to kind of talk about what this project would do. And if it's something that's not an on the ground project, you would put maybe NA for phosphorus reduction or anything like that. But it's essentially trying to put upfront the type of information that we'll need to report to Bowser later. So even before you get your funding approved, you're providing that info. So that's that memorandum. And then you see the list of informational attachments / templates included with the form. That's some additional information. And we can go through those briefly one by one. So that first one is this project request flow chart. And big thanks to Barbara Heitkamp for making it look so nice and putting that together. So you see up at the top, it talks about how the policy committee approves that annual work plan and then provides oversight for plan implementation. So we are consistently reporting back to the policy committee in these progress updates and things like that. And so what the steering committee had decided though was the policy committee meets quarterly. And so rather having the policy committee approve every project that goes forward, the project approvals would go to the steering committee, and it's up to the steering committee to ensure that it fits within that work plan that was approved by the policy committee. So always keeping that approval in mind. And so there's just the steps of filling out the form, submitting to your subcommittee first, then going to the steering committee, and then talking about the process of invoicing and things like that. And we can get into that in more detail if anybody has questions, but the one point I want to call attention to is in the bottom right, that note about emergency projects. If I recall, I believe this came up because that South Washington Watershed District project, it got approved before we had this process in place. And the reasoning was it was kind of an emergency project. They really wanted to get out there as soon as possible because there was erosion occurring. And so in this case, what we had recommended is if there is something that needs to be fast tracked, some kind of emergency project, really the first step is to reach out to one of the planning team members. And then on a subsequent page, they're all listed. And what the planning team would do is get together and figure out a process for moving up those timelines, getting that subcommittee to meet sooner than regularly planned, getting that steering committee to meet, and just working together to fast track that process. So contact info, here's just the regularly scheduled steering committee meetings. And so the request deadline, if you want, let's say we've got our steering committee meeting this October 27th, you should have had your request sent to Angie Hong by October 20th, so she can distribute it and give plenty of time for steering committee members to review. So that table is there. And then the subsequent attachments are the priority water body maps, always coming back into mind those priorities that were set forth in that comprehensive watershed management plan. So we had, let's see, what was this first one? Looks like streams.
Trying to make it smaller here.
Oh, yeah. Oh no, this one is groundwater. So
Vulnerable
the first map
groundwater.
is, yep, vulnerable groundwater. And then it goes streams, regionally significant rivers and streams, and then the regionally significant lakes. The lakes for internal analysis, and then finally high priority areas for wetland restoration. So those will all apply to various types of projects that might come forward. The next one, so they had outlined in that 10-year plan, here's the targeting criteria and scoring matrix that we want to do for those ag and urban BMPs. So that's already been laid out for us. And so now what the various subcommittees have been in the process of and are still working on finishing up is, okay, here's the scoring criteria for ag and urban. What's our scoring criteria for wetlands or for internal analyses or for other targeting analyses? And so that's the further attachments further down. We have those for wetlands and internal, and then the targeting analyses are in process right now. But once we have those, the scoring for those kind of analyses to decide if the steering committee should approve them, that'll be part of the packet, and the packet will then be complete. I think that kind of covers everything. I'm happy to take questions, or if any other planning team members have anything else to add on that process. The subcommittee leads really did a lot to fill out all those attachments and everything.
Questions for Emily?
Well, I have several.
Go ahead, Jackie.
Okay. So as I understand what you said today, the action on the priority projects that are in our plan are dependent upon our partners applying for that project to be done.
Yep, every project will need to have a project sponsor to have that agreement with the fiscal agent, Chisago SWCD, and have that payment method.
So is the partner then responsible for the 10%?
In some cases, yes. So in that budget, we had allocated the match dollars for, and Craig, remind me which items those were. I think it was mostly ag and urban.
Activities 2, ag BMPs, and activities 5, urban BMPs. And then the activities 3 has already met its match. So yes, it's all for the construction of 2 and 5.
Let's see where we go. There we go. Sorry to make people dizzy.
Okay, so the Lower St. Croix targeted projects will be, again, dependent upon the partners applying for that money and getting that project done. I just want to make certain I understand that.
Yes, and then the Lower St. Croix itself is also doing some general targeting work, but it would really, you'd need a project sponsor to come forward and shepherd the project forward, because the Lower St. Croix is not its own entity.
Mm-hmm.
There needs to be a partner.
Okay, my last question is on the steering committee. You've published the names of and the distribution by county of the members of the planning commission. Who are the steering committee members? I could not find it on the website. Maybe I'm not looking in the right spot, but it's not part of this documentation either. So can we get that published?
Sure.
Yes, we can do that. Angie, can you think of anywhere we already have it, or?
I was trying to remember. I know I've sent out the spreadsheet to this group before, but I'm not certain that I have it posted on the website. I could post it on the website also. Yeah, because like you said, we only have the planning team and subcommittee leads listed currently.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments in the review here? So what you're looking for, Emily and Craig, is a motion to approve the progress request form and the process that we've got laid out here. Is that is what I understand you're looking for direction from the policy committee on.
Yeah, I think that if the policy committee would like to make a motion. Craig, would you recommend that?
Yeah, I don't know that we were looking specifically for a motion on this one. It was more of, I think, an informational material for the policy committee.
And that's fine if we don't need approval from the policy committee. Are there any objections to the way this is laid out, the way the process will unfold as we, look at requests?
Mr. Chairman, this is Jim Burkholz. It seems to me that they've laid out a process that still has oversight by the policy committee. So I think it gives them the room they need to do what they think is needed, but we'll be regularly involved in oversight on that, and that's satisfactory to me.
Very good. Any other comments or thoughts?
Steve Holland and I agree. I think they've got a good program laid out.
Very good.
This is
Anything
Janet.
else?
This is Janet. I just have one quick question. So if I recall in our plan, we had more projects proposed than we had money available. So is the working model here on a first come, first served basis?
Currently, yes, we do not have application deadlines. It has been a working through your project lead brings a project forward to the subcommittee. If it meets the criteria of the subcommittee, that subcommittee makes out recommendations to the steering committee.
So theoretically, a lower priority project could get funded because it happened to come in earlier than maybe a higher priority project?
That is correct. I mean, that always could happen with any project. But if it meets the scoring criteria that's laid out in the approved work plan, that's how we're moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, this is Jackie again,
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair. I have a little trouble seeing what kind of oversight the or the policy committee is going to have on this. That last question kind of brought it forward. But, it's supposed to be additional monies to what is happening on the clean water front. And so it should accelerate activity, not take the place of. And if the Lower St. Croix has come up with a list of priority projects, I'm not understanding why the Lower St. Croix partnership is not moving on those priority projects instead of having the partners do it. So that might be something that we have to take offline. It sounds like there's a consensus with the people that spoke already and wanting to move forward with this, but I have a real issue with that aspect, and so I can't vote for that at this time. The process is fine, but I don't like how it's laid out. I don't like the structure of it. I don't think it's fitting the objectives that I understood them to be when. I'm not hearing all of that, but.
Craig, had you shared a comment there, Craig, or not?
No, sir, that was not me.
No, I'm looking to see if I can figure out where we're getting the background noise from. No, can't figure it out. I can tell you that the steering committee on Wednesday is also reviewing 2 proposals related to prioritization protocols and conducting prioritization studies. So I think that, those will be driving some of those, high priority activities that were listed in the plan that needed to have the prioritization work happen at the upfront before the actual in the ground project, or in the case of street sweeping, the actual, activity happens. The study has to happen at the front end.
Well, I think it matters too who's on the steering committee. I don't recall if there's a representative from the policy committee on the steering committee. I think early on Craig Leiser was on, but I'm not sure if that was just at the very, very beginning. But it'll help when that list is published.
Jackie, the steering committee is made up of one staff member of each of the 16 members of the Joint Powers Agreement.
Okay.
I should say a minimum of one staff member. That's when we do the voting at the end, it's one staff member votes per member of the JPA staff.
Okay, thank you. That helps.
I would encourage partners. I would encourage partners, if they have projects that are high priority listed in the work plan, to, they start locally, they start with each partner, and I would encourage them to bring those forward to the subcommittee, especially if they have projects that they feel are shovel ready and can be put in before the December 31st, 2023 deadline.
It also might be worth noting that, and we've been back and forth with Bowser on this a few times. Bowser has decided that any kind of monitoring, so diagnostic monitoring for project targeting, is not an eligible grant expense. So that's kind of another element in this when we're prioritizing projects. Really, monitoring is a good way to do that tributary monitoring, to go beyond just desktop analysis, but it isn't an allowable grant expense.
But it could be part of the match.
Not eligible for match either.
The expense. I'm talking about the expense at the local level.
It can't be counted toward the match. It would be just locally, it would be upon the local partners to pay for their own monitoring.
Mm-hmm.
So as I understand, I mean, this was for discussion only or information only. You're not looking for approval on the process from the policy committee. It's just information on how we're structured and how you're moving forward with respect to project requests.
Correct.
So there's no action, but certainly this is an item that could be discussed further. We may find as we work through these requests and stuff that there may be some changes necessary. And we would likely have discussions about those in the event that that would occur. Any other thoughts on the process, the progress request form or the process here? Okay, we've had a few comments, and I hope as we move forward, just keep those comments in mind and as part of the thought process here. Okay. Now I believe we're moving into subcommittee updates. Am I right, Angie?
Yep.
Thank you for pulling that up. And Jay Riggs on the agronomy outreach, you got a status update?
Yes, sir. Thank you. I do have a quick update. The closing date for the agronomist position was extended and actually just closed yesterday. And the interview committee is going to be meeting on Friday to review all the applications and rank their top 3. And then we'll be offering invitations for interviews coming up. We're going to have that information to Joel by Thursday, Joel, we promise. And then, Joel, when's our first day for interviews scheduled tentatively?
Beginning of November. So I think 2 weeks.
So best case scenario, we are looking at having an offer sometime in December. But the process is moving forward, and we have I can't say much. The U is very sensitive about sensitive information and anonymity for the applicants. So I'm going to resist any questions about any details about the applications, and I'll just defer to you, Joel.
Joel, could you talk just briefly about the university's process in hiring? I know there's a limited number of times that the university goes out for hiring and that type of thing. I think it's just it's a little bit of a different type of a process that maybe everyone's not familiar with, and the hiring times sometimes can be problematic, especially if you're filling a position or something like that. Just tell us a little bit about that process.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would actually agree with you that even from our side, the timelines for some of that can be, it cannot be what we want in terms of getting good work done on the ground. I think that with an agreement like this, our priority is that on the ground partnership. And so we're trying to move this through as quickly as we can. As Jay alluded to, we also, as a relatively large public institution, we've got some processes in place that can slow that down, sometimes with good, almost always with good intention, but sometimes with unexpected results. So in terms of the process, and I'll touch on some points where we will be able to get some public feedback and insight from you all if you're interested in providing that. We announced the position and opened it for applications. I guess it was towards the middle to end of August. It was originally open for, I think, 4 weeks, and so scheduled to close at the end of September. The search committee, which is made up of some representatives from, I guess is it the steering committee? Am I getting that term right, Jay?
We have Lance from the policy committee. We have Dave from Chisago SWCD board. Both of them are, Lance is, as you all know, is a farmer, and Dave is a crop advisor. And then Barbara and myself are participating from the local partners, and then 2 representatives from the university.
Yeah,
I think that's everything.
Yep, and it's from the university, it's myself and one of our extension educators who deals quite a bit with agriculture and water management issues. And we were not, as a committee, as this group or that group was not able to meet to review applications until the end of October, actually on Friday, like Jay mentioned. And so we decided to extend the opening for the educator position, just to give people a little bit more time since we weren't able to meet anyways. So that position, the opening did close. We closed yesterday. This week, the committee is individually reviewing applications, and we'll meet on Friday to talk about who we would recommend to bring forward to an interview. For people who accept that invitation, we can then have, as part of that interview process, a public portion of the process. What that is, I think, has yet to be determined. That's one of the conversations we're going to have on Friday, in terms of whether it's it could be something like a presentation on the candidates' ideas for how to get this work done on the ground. It could be a meet and greet, a little bit more formal. But there will be opportunities not only to meet the potential candidates, but also to provide some feedback on them at that point. Part of the reason why we wait until then to provide a more public forum is that part of the university's process is to allow for confidential applications in the first round. And so that's the assumption that the applicants make when they're going through the application process. But once we invite them in for an interview, we make sure that it's okay with them, that we make their names public, and it's a more of an open process at that point. So Friday, we're going to be both reviewing the applications and also determining things like the format for the interviews. And I just checked on my calendar. The first one is going to be on November 9th. And then we have time on the 12th and the 15th as well for that. And so we can, and Jay, I guess I would look to you to see how it's easiest to communicate those with this group here. Fran, did that answer your question or did that help?
Yeah, it did. And I mean, I'm familiar with the process. I just wanted to make sure that others were familiar as well, because it is a little different process to deal with it, and it makes it difficult if let's say that someone leaves and we need to hire a position, someone to fill in or something like that, because of the timing of the university structure and that, it becomes very difficult. But I still think our decision to contract through the university makes a lot of sense. And I think I would assume you're able to share. I mean, I assume we've got some quality candidates and a good pool to choose from, or can't you even share that?
So we have about 15 applicants. I will say that that's lower than I would have hoped for. But as we've talked about in other places, you only need one. It just depends on if that one is really good. I have taken a look at least the ones who had submitted before last weekend, and I think there's some highly qualified folks in that pool. And I think so it will be a matter of both us evaluating them and also them evaluating the position and making sure it's a good fit for them. I will say that there's obviously been a longer period of time for this initial process than I think any of us would have hoped for. If in the unexpected event we hire someone, they're on board, down the road they decide to take another position, we have a process and a process in place for filling more quickly behind positions like this, even if it's on an interim basis, to make sure that the work continues to get done. We've got some agreements at the county level or between multiple counties where that process is in place. And so we can fill interim positions more quickly to make sure that those connections and the relationship and the work doesn't get delayed or lost after it gets up and running. So that's something that we're trying to be very cognizant of as we go through the process too.
Thank you, Joel. Any other questions for Jay or Joel? Well, we look forward to a quality person being hired here and beginning work. This is a good time to be coming into this kind of work too. So Craig or Mike, updates on the urban and ag projects?
I don't believe Mike's with us right now, but I'll jump in. And I noticed the
Okay.
sun just hit my camera really good, so I had to turn my computer here a little bit, which is a good thing, I guess. So activity 2 and 5, which we just combined, has a combined budget of $360,000. We've encumbered to date half of those funds, or $180,100 of those on a couple projects. Moving forward in those, it sounds like the McQuaid project has wrapped up. The Hinsey project is going to be scheduled to be installed here the next week or two. They had to wait basically for a late October, early November deadline because of some seeding deadlines there. Activity 4, Jay, if I recall, we're waiting on the non-structural ag BMPs for the agronomist person to get going and really get this up and running in 2022. Is that correct, Jay?
Yes.
And then the non-structural urban BMPs, which would be the enhanced street sweeping, Mike is taking the lead on that. He's working in partnership with the Activity 8 Target Analysis Group, and they are bringing together a proposal on doing the assessments for these high priority areas within our urban areas for street sweeping. Locally at the Chisago SWC, we have reached out to several of our communities, and there's a lot of interest in bringing this forward by them that were listed on the high priority, basically Rush City, North Branch, I know Wyoming, Taylor's Falls, there's a bunch of interest already by those communities to get going on this. So we're looking forward over this next winter to get agreements up and running with our cities to start doing enhanced street sweeping in 2022. And then activity 9, I'll just touch on that one since I'm here too, that we don't have any requests at this point. It's a small budget item of $40,000. And we haven't had any requests yet by anybody coming forward, but I've had some discussion with a couple partners who will probably be bringing a request sometime soon for those funds. That's all I have, sir, unless there's any questions.
Any questions for Craig? You talked about the street sweeping. I noticed there was some nice educational materials out regarding that, and that takes us into our next item, which is the update on watershed education. Angie or Barbara?
Sure thing. Well, I can start us off. Hopefully you all received an email newsletter from me via MailChimp on late Wednesday night of last week. So my goal is to provide you with a little bit richer information than you might get out of the meeting packet on a quarterly basis. And, just give you a more behind the scenes idea of some of these education programs that we are discussing, and they're in development, but that there might not be a concrete deliverable happening yet. Because there was a question from Manager Anderson about MREP and Lower St. Croix, I thought that this might be a good opportunity to share a table that I have been using when I am talking about the difference between these two overlapping partnerships. So the background on the East Metro Water Resource Education Program is that it is a partnership of 25 local government entities that are either wholly or partially in Washington County. And so it is all of the watershed districts or WMOs that are in the Lower St. Croix partnership are also in MREP. Washington County is a partner, and then Washington Conservation District is the host. And then in addition, we have 15 cities and townships that are part of that program. So that's been going since 2006. And I have a table here on the left-hand column shows the kinds of activities that we are doing through MREP. So MREP is entirely locally funded. It's not receiving any grant funds from the state or from Board of Water and Soil Resources. And we've been doing activities like general water and watershed education, helping cities and some of the watershed districts to meet their MS4 stormwater permit requirements for education, developing the Blue Thumb Planting for Clean Water program, outreach for partner programs and plans, engaging volunteers like the Minnesota Water Stewards, developing education partnerships, media and communications, technical trainings, we call them Stormwater U for the municipal staff and businesses. And then in more recent years, groundwater education and AIS education also. So there's kind of this whole world of activities that is happening that's entirely locally funded. And some of the northern partners are going to be joining on to MREP in 2022. So that is exciting because if you look on the right-hand column, there is a smaller list of education activities which we are funding through additional funds that are being provided by the state's Watershed-Based Implementation Fund grant. And because that is coming from the state and coming from clean water funds, there are more guidelines on what you can and can't do with the state grant funds. So for example, the state grant funds cannot be used for AIS education, even though that's something that's a local priority. So under the Lower St. Croix funds, we specifically said that we would use those grant dollars to do education for local decision makers, to support MIDs and shoreline ordinances, support for the agronomy program, outreach for landscape stewardship planning, outreach to shoreline property owners, and then coordination and relationship building, especially in the northern communities where there hasn't been a locally funded education program. So these funds and the Lower St. Croix grant are paying for half of Barbara's time, and then the other half of her time is getting paid for through the local funds from MREP. So she's doing both activities, but that hopefully helps to give you an idea of the kinds of things that are happening. There's a lot happening, and there's a lot of overlap, and it's anybody who knows anything about education and outreach, it's really hard to draw a clear line and say you know, this is leading towards a project development somewhere down the road, but this isn't, because we know that there's a lot of general awareness raising and relationship building that has to happen all the time and for years before you get to the point where you can knock on somebody's door one day and say, we want to do a project with you, and they say yes. So there is, you know, a lot of really important stuff that at the moment is being funded locally through that MREP program and will continue to be. Are there any questions on like the education things that were in the newsletter I sent out last week? Do you want Barbara to give an overview of any of those programs, or do you feel like they were well enough described in the newsletter?
I thought it was great. This is Jackie Anderson. I thought you did a nice job.
Okay.
Glad to hear it.
Anything to add, Barbara? I mean, as long as we've got you here.
Sure.
To what Angie was sharing.
It's definitely been, I've been on the job for almost 5 months now. And so I feel like I've got a good familiarity with a lot of the players, which is great, but I'm always continuing to make those connections. But really just excited to really start building kind of this outreach calendar for next year, and excited to work with many of you guys in making that happen. So it's been a lot of fun. I'm enjoying it. Let's continue on.
Okay, thank you much. Unless there's questions, we'll move into our wetland restoration. Becky.
Yeah, so we put together the selection criteria, and of course the application was combined, and so all the activities were on one, which makes it quite simple, I think, for the partners to kind of go through and check off what might be appropriate for their particular project. I've talked to one partner a little bit about a potential project, but that's about it so far. I'm expecting that will start to maybe ramp up maybe more next spring as people are out in the field again and finding projects. But at this point, that's where we're at.
Any questions for Becky? Susanna, do you want to cover some of the internal analysis?
I know that she had, she sent me a note. My son has a conference at 4:10 today. We should be done by 4:30, and I'll join after that. So she's on, but perhaps not right in front of the computer at the moment.
There she is.
Here she is.
Hello. I apologize. I'm sorry. I was moving my screen and then it just completely shut down out of Google. So hi, everyone. So with activity 7, our subcommittee is in the process of receiving responses to the call for projects, and those are due on October 31st. It's just the general interest in applying for funding, so we know which groups, which partners are interested. We have a subcommittee meeting on November 3rd to review those responses and then provide feedback to the groups that are interested. So far, Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District and Anoka Conservation District are interested in applying for funding. And then the Chisago Lakes Lake Improvement District and Chisago County are interested, as well as Goose and Rush Lake Associations, but they have not formally submitted a response yet. Our overall application deadline is December 15th. So there still is time to submit the separate internal analyses application, as well as the project request form, and then also submitting a contractor's quote for the internal analysis study. So we're on target for meeting our timelines, and then having that meeting coming up in November will give us a really good idea on who's applying for the funding. And that's my overall update, unless anyone has any questions.
Thank you, Susanna. Any questions? Jay, you want to update us on activity 8?
Yes, thank you again. Activity 8, actually, we've had quite a few items on the agenda. At the last meeting, we have supported or recommended approval of the update to the targeting and prioritization protocols. We're finalizing agreements with Chisago to implement that work. The work is going to be completed by a combination of partners, Washington, Chisago, and Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed are going to receive funding for doing that work. We also received a proposal for doing a prioritization targeting analysis for the Rock Lake area in Pine County. That proposal was taken back, sent back to the applicants to revise, and that is continuing to be modified to meet the prioritization criteria and minimum criteria for being funded. Two other proposals that were submitted recently have come to the subcommittee that are now going to the steering committee. Our proposal for doing catchment prioritization for the Sunrise River and Pine County portion of the basin to identify and prioritize catchments for targeting implementation activities, as well as the prioritization process for identifying and targeting street sweeping activities. I think that's everything.
And both of those items will get discussed at the steering committee on Wednesday.
Correct.
Any questions for Jay? Thank you, Jay.
Excellent, thank you.
Jamie, you want to provide an update on the 2023-24 work-based?
Gladly. So the next round of watershed-based implementation funding is coming right up, and I want to share a little bit about that with you. The amounts and the policies have worked their way through Bowser staff and through a Bowser subcommittee. And so what I'm sharing with you tonight is what's in the Bowser board packet for 2 days from now. So it's not approved yet, but I think it's worth sharing. The first thing to know about the next round of funding is that there are two pots of funding, just as there were in the last round. There is a metro pot, and then there's a whole watershed pot. So on your screen, you see a map on the left that is the metro areas, and on the right are the one watershed, one plan areas that would be essentially the whole basin funding areas. And those areas that have an approved plan or are close to it will be funded. This is unchanged for the Lower St. Croix area from last time that we had this funding. The amounts are very similar to the last round. There is a metro pot of 807,509, a whole watershed pot of 471,000 and change. So about 1.2 million. This is actually, I think, about $24,000 more than the last round. The amounts are based on a formula with 90% public lands and 10% public waters, with a $75,000 minimum in the metro planning areas, a total of 6.5 million in the metro, and 250K minimum for those whole watershed areas. Timing here is that for the Lower St. Croix, if it plays out as is in the Bowser board packet, these would be FY 2023 funds, which means they'd become available July 1st, 2022. We, of course, need to have a work plan in place and approved by our board conservationists before we would actually receive those funds. So 3-year grants that, well, give or take 3 years, depending upon when you actually receive the funds, that would end December 2025. Now, for comparison, the current grant ends December 2023. So there is overlap. We're going to be working off 2 grants simultaneously for a while. The metro pot portion of this is the same as it was the last round. There's a convene process with representatives from local stakeholders, and they can decide to use some of that funding in just the metro, or essentially defer or pool it with that whole watershed money, which is what was done last time. And then last, just a few policy details. It's 10% match as was in the past. That's unchanged. Eligible projects have to come from an eligible plan. The One Watershed, One Plan is one of those, as well as watershed organization plans, watershed districts, and SWCD comp plans. And one policy, there's a number of small policy changes, but one of them caught my eye more than others, and that was about education programming. And now ineligible is development and delivery of educational activities and curriculum that don't support or lead to implementation of practices. And I've had a good conversation with Barb Peichel, who's on the call tonight, and I really don't feel that that's a concern anymore. Angie, just a few minutes ago, showed a nice table with the types of outreach and education that's being supported with this money. And it is clear to me that that's fitting of what is eligible. What's intended to be ineligible, not eligible, is general education programming. For example, telling the public or a school group about the water cycle would be an example of that. So I think we're well positioned there. I don't have anything additional, but certainly would entertain questions and have Bowser staff on the line that can back me up.
Thank you, Jamie. Any questions for Jamie? And of course, all of this, even what is on our screen now, Jamie, that is for consideration, correct, at the coming meeting?
Correct.
Not hearing any questions, Jamie. Thank you.
Thank you.
Following our agenda, there an opportunity, and I'm sorry, Jackie, did we get the other items that you wanted to talk about, the emergency action protocol and the workflow programs? Did we adequately address those here in the discussion or not?
Well, the point was to include them on a future meeting, but I don't think that the emergency action project protocol, I don't think we have one yet, do we? I mean, they're working on it, but I didn't hear any details about that in the presentation.
I think Emily or Craig can speak up if I'm wrong, but I think that the emergency action protocol is that for the most part, projects will follow the same processes outlined currently, but that if a time-sensitive project comes up, the planning team can work with the applicant to accelerate the timeline so that a subcommittee meeting might be scheduled earlier than it would normally be scheduled in order for a project to get reviewed in a more timely fashion.
Is that written down as a policy somewhere? So that we have it in writing for everybody?
It isn't written as a policy, it's the little call out.
I heard it as a
closure.
concept. Yeah, I heard it as a concept. I think that we need to have it actually put into our policy and procedure processes, so that any of our partners anyone can go to that and see what it is. I don't think it should be verbal.
I think I can edit the project flow chart and just be more explicit about that.
Yeah, I think I saw it on the bottom of your flow chart, that sentence about that.
Yeah, but I think it has to be a policy as well. The flow chart is just a quick glance at how the process works, but we have other policies written down. We should have that one written down. That's my opinion.
Well, maybe we can put that into a policy format and then bring that to the next policy committee meeting.
Appreciate that.
Other items for discussion at future meetings? Anyone at all?
So this is Janet. Do we want to talk more about the project request process in a future meeting? In particular, just addressing, priority projects and making sure that maybe there's adequate outreach to try to push those forward ahead of lower. I'm a little uncomfortable with the first come, first serve basis of it. And maybe it's just because I'm not understanding this well enough, or because it's so early on in the cycle, but it might be good to have a further discussion of that, just in addressing the prioritization aspects.
Well, I think it's good timing as well with the steering committee meeting coming up on Wednesday, that's something we can discuss at a steering committee level too.
Okay, we can certainly add that to a future topic for discussion. And I know there was quite a bit of discussion here today around that issue as well. So,
Mr. Chair, this is Jackie
ahead.
again. The MRAP and the expansion of the membership, or how we're going to handle those additional partners.
Angie, do you have a comment on that?
Is there, what is the question that you're having?
The question is that the group that's paying for the MRAP program now, that program is being expanded based on those contributions from that list of contributors. So in order to reach all of the partners, is there going to be a contribution requested of these additional partners in the Lower St. Croix?
Oh, yes. Sorry if that wasn't clear earlier. Yes. There are several of the new, or several northern partners are now joining MRAP. So several of the entities that were not previously funding MRAP will be beginning in 2022.
Okay, I think, if you can have something in writing to that effect, and
Sure.
how the dues are going to be distributed.
Yep.
We have some issues with how the dues are unequal right now at the CLF-LWD. We will be discussing that at our Thursday meeting, but we want to make certain that everybody's got a foot in the door, not just a toe.
Yep.
Any other items? When is our next meeting scheduled, Angie?
Oh, this is probably going to be the $1 million question here, because we have been discussing whether we were meeting quarterly, whether we were meeting every other month. If we are meeting every other month, that would put us into December. If we are meeting quarterly, that would put us into January. So this is a great question for the group to discuss. I assume that nobody has a desire to meet on December 27th. I don't know if people have a desire to meet on Monday, December 20th, or if the group would prefer to meet again in January, which would put us at, I always have this question, if we're meeting the last or the 4th. Well, that would put us at the January 24th.
Any thoughts from the group?
I'd say January.
I share a similar opinion.
This is Janet. I would agree with that.
Yeah, this is Mike Mergens. I agree. January's fine.
Anyone else want to weigh in? January, I see Wade has got a note suggesting January. So it seems that that will be our next meeting then. Obviously we don't know at this point in time whether we'll be meeting in person or virtually. Am I correct in that assumption, or are we planning on a virtual meeting?
I would leave it up to all of you to decide, but yeah, I don't know. I guess it's anybody's guess what it's going to be like in January.
I think at this point, we'll just kind of wait and play it by ear and you know, we can coordinate as we get closer to that date or after the first of the year. So unless there's other business, I would be happy to entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a
Odegaard,
Mike
so
motion.
Mergens, I'll make a motion.
Okay, I'll let you decide, Angie, who actually made that motion and who seconded.
Uh-oh, it's Barbara who's taking notes.
I saw Doug's screen light up and Susan's light lit up. I'm not sure. So we'll take the motion from Doug and the second from Commissioner Morris. Any discussion? Any objection to the motion to adjourn? Hearing none, motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Great to see the progress that's being made, not only on projects, but you know, our processes as well. And I think great financial updates as well. So
Share one quick note too, that Angie did a great job in putting together an application for our Association of Minnesota Counties and Bowser Award. So stay tuned. Hopefully we'll let you know if we won, but so thank you, Angie, for putting all that work into it.
Yep.
yeah, did that get sent off in time, Angie?
Yep. It's in the interwebs somewhere. Yep.
Fabulous. Thanks for doing that. Why don't maybe we can add that to our agenda for January.
Yeah, hopefully in January, it will be announcement of the wonderful award that we won.
Agreed.
Super. Thank you, everyone, for being with us today.
Thank you.